Hi, I'm Henk, and I'm running for United States Senate. The year is 2022 in the state of California. I am talking to somebody that helps me sleep at night. And I am so glad that Carlos Ovalle is running for city council in the 7th District of Long Beach, California. I lived there for 50 years, and there is a multitude of problems that have arisen over the past dozen years, and we'll get to that. So, first question is I grew up on the east side of Long Beach, the district of the 5th district, where there was Millikan High School and we had estates. What was it like for you growing up and raising your children on the west side of Long Beach, a city where there is literally two different cities?
Well, you nailed it. It is a tale of two cities. We couldn't be any more different. Um, One of the main focuses of my advocacy and activism has been inequities, inequities of everything really, but park space has been one of the primary ones recently. Uh, and let me just start off with the statistic. Um, the national average for park space in the United States is about 9 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. The east side of Long Beach, where you grew up, has 17. So pretty much twice the national average. On the other hand, my side, where I grew up, has just a little over 1 acre. So we have 1/9 of the national average. We have 6% of the park space that Eastern Long Beach has. So those are just numbers, but the reason why it's more than numbers is because uh, parks directly affect our physical and mental health. Every mature tree produces sufficient oxygen for two adults during the year. Every tree consumes something like 40 something pounds of CO2 per year. So really trees are and other vegetation are the lungs of our city, and we don't have lungs. You know, periodically you're gonna hear me cough, and I, it's not a cold, it's not a flu, it's asthma. Um, and this is what I have to live with. This is what many people on my side have to live with. Part of the inequities that we suffer are that it's not just that we lack um, park space. We also have the highest levels of pollution in the entire nation, particularly ozone. Just 400 feet away from me, due west, is the Long Beach Freeway. Uh, it transports uh, goods coming from the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles to the rest of the nation, and it's packed full of trucks spewing uh, particulate matter that gets into our lungs, it gets into our bloodstream. So we're the ones that really need to have all those trees, all that park space. If I could stretch a bungee cord over to the east side of Long Beach and drag those parks over to my side, it would help a lot. It's not the complete solution, obviously. I mean, we have to focus on the source, and the source are the diesel trucks. There's technology, uh, existing technology that would allow us to replace the trucks um, with electric trucks. The 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 Port of Long Beach, supported by City Council, have recently started to actually. I think this is the first month that they're going to charge what is called a TEU fee, and this fee is a $10 fee per basic container unit, which is a 20-foot container. And that fee, the intent of that fee is to use it to help subsidize the electrification of the trucking traffic. The problem is that $10 is grossly insufficient, and the shipping companies like Amazon and Walmart and a few others. These big shippers are crying, well, it's going to affect the bottom line. Consumers aren't going to want to purchase items from us because it's going to go up. But I mean, it's $10 per container. It's laughable. If I take a container and I pack it full of TVs, the price for each one of those is going to be 3 cents.
Well, allow me to interrupt, but even hearing about this at first makes me think that it is just something that is phony and fake. That
It is, yes.
The real cost is to not give up the practice as usual, which is keeping the containers trucks on that freeway.
Yeah. So we have, I mean, there's all sorts of things. The freeways are not the only source of pollution. About 1.2 miles due west, we also have refineries. About 4 miles due south, we have one of the last two municipal incinerators in California. So all our trash, all the rejects from our the stuff that we put in the recycle bin that can't be recycled, which is about 18% of the content, also gets shipped over to the it's called a SERF, SERRF. So it gets sent over to the incinerator, and then we get to breathe all those fumes. Then on top of that, there is
from the burning of plastics.
Right, exactly, and everything else that people.
And how far is that from where you live?
4 miles due south. So yeah, so the wind patterns, the way the wind patterns work, is that the wind predominantly comes from the south and the west. So basically,
or your neighborhood, the winds predominantly come directly from the port onto your neighborhood.
Yes. So from the port, from the incinerator, from the freeway, from the refineries, and from the coal and petroleum coke facilities. So, which is another aspect. We have, ironically, our port is called the Green Port. It's kind of wishful thinking or greenwashing, as we know. They mean green as in it's not painted green. They mean green as in, look at us. We have these little electric forklifts that unload stuff from the ships. But I mean, it's beyond being a token ridiculous effort.
It's because it's like after the Exxon Valdez, and they talked, and I believe they talked about saving some sort of owl because Exxon cares.
Right, exactly. So the majority of the exports from our port are coal and petroleum coke. They're basically the two dirtiest fuels that we produce. Petroleum coke is left over from from the refining process, and it's like a black talcum powder. It can't be used as fuel in the U.S. because it's so toxic. The burning of it is causes tons of CO2, far more than coal. And so we export it to Asian countries. how can we call ourselves a green port if all of this stuff is getting sent to other countries with far more lax uh, regulations in terms of burning this stuff?
Do you remember what year it
And
was that they were allowed to cover that when they were piling that up at the port? Up until a certain point, they were allowed to just pile it up, and then
right,
that the top soil per se of these piles would become aerosols and come and
mhm,
flow with the wind from the south
yes,
into west side of Long Beach.
and land in my living room. So yeah, so this happened in 2014. So most of our current council members were voted for uh, to continue to renew the contract to export these um, these dirty fuels.
Mhm.
In
These are
and
definitely the big ones, but these are definitely the big ones. So what does the delay of the Green New Deal mean for the West Side? And then what I mean specifically is the way it was written by Howie Hawkins was that from the Green Party version, the 2030 was the deadline to stop burning fossilized fuel. What I've seen, the Democrats version waits until 2050. So
mhm,
it's a delay of any action. Well, so it basically looks for micro action over the next 25 years rather than abrupt action over the next few years. So it's a non-committal action. And what does that delay mean for you on the West Side, given oil production, the freeways, the what happens with all this with all of that you just spoke? What
mhm.
versus 20
How
and
does it impact us?
30 versus
Well,
2050, what does it mean for you?
I testified at the we have a commission, the Sustainable City Commission, and I testified there uh, I guess a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, all of this stuff sounds good, but it's grossly insufficient because a child born today or a toddler today, uh, by the time these these policies take effect, that child and all his friends, his or her friends, will have suffered um, the damage that will ensure that their lifespan is 5 to 15 years shorter than where you grew up, Hank. So, life expectancy, I mean, people say it's just a number, it's just a statistic, it's a general rule, but, you know, I mean, I feel it. I have, asthma, which, there's a high incidence of asthma here. I and I consider myself privileged because I have air conditioning and I and with filters. But I'm outside. I don't own a car, so I ride my bike everywhere, and I breathe in all this crap. Uh, but you know, we also suffer the highest incidence of unit overcrowding. We have a huge stock of older buildings that don't have any air conditioning. So people open their windows to get ventilation, and we don't have sufficient parks, etc. So it's so their deadlines are really lines of death, literally for us. These kids, if we start multiplying, just in my district, there are 50,000 people. Half of those are children, and and the average lifespan uh, that is cut is 10 years per person. So do the math. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of years cut off from our lifespan. Um, and you know, we have, you mentioned the Green Party has a 2030. Ours is 2035. Just to put that in perspective. So technically, we're supposed to end oil extraction in 2035. Technically, our truck fleets will have been electrified by 2035. We don't have that time. And still, even if they are electrified, we will still continue exporting coal and petroleum coke from our port. And it means that we will still be not quite as directly, but indirectly, we are still basically merchants of death.
Well, that's very sad. I would, I would guess that if someone was to ask you why you decided to run for city council, that probably would be a very large part of it right there.
That's a huge part of it. That's the first item in my candidate statement, is that I have the commitment to address the environmental justice that results in our shortened lifespans. That's the very first item there.
It does seem to me life is very frustrating for me as well. I've been saying lately that a Democrat will sound in an ideological way always sound better than me, because they have the ideology marketing down. But when you don't have to come through with anything that you're saying, you can promise the sky, you'll say these people will say anything.
Right. And that's really what it is. It's marketing. They have a hugely effective marketing machine.
Mm-hmm. And it's really sad because they've taken, from my personal point of view, they've taken the branding of the Green New Deal per se, and then adopted it, and then fumbled it on the national stage, and forever that will now just be a failed attempt by the Democrats, and will never really be part of this call to as lately people were talking about Extinction Rebellion. So I feel very strongly about the environment, very passionate, but instead of being the fool and screaming, I figure I'll just play their game and hopefully create my own conversations that's aside from the idea that there is change on the way, where I don't see as change really being significant change being on the way, not in time.
Not in time, exactly.
So what are your, along with those things, really quickly, please tell me your top, if you can, what are your top campaign ideas? What do you see for your community that you would like to change? I am sincere in saying that you are the reason I moved away from Long Beach after 50 years. And give me an hour and I'll list all the things that the current people that are running that town are doing wrong and selfishly.
Yeah.
So, and people will probably ask me why, if I have so much criticism and disdain for the city I left, why would I miss it? Why would I care? It is because what's happening to the people that are still there cannot leave. Unfortunately, my family died, and many of them died, and I was able to move away. But there are many people that can't leave Long Beach because all their family is there. There are people, real lives at stake. So, what are your ideas about to make your campaign healthier? I mean, your community healthier?
Well, let me first talk a little bit about what you mentioned about not being able to move away. Earlier I had mentioned that I have air conditioning in my home. I'm a professional. I'm an architect, and so I consider myself privileged. And I feel for everyone else who lives here, mostly people of color. The demographics in my part of the city are mostly Latino and Filipino, and there's a mix of others. There are blacks and other Asians and whites, and increasingly
very large Cambodian population. An
Yeah,
unusual amount of Buddhist Cambodian, not unusual, I don't know what usual would be,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
too to say, but there's a large
right.
Buddhist temples.
Yes,
It's actually a very, it's a cross section. There's Vietnamese there as well, but it's not the primary.
Samoans.
Samoans, yes, it's
Yeah. So, most of the people here suffer from, aside from the health issues, they suffer from high rates of unemployment, high rates of poverty, and they can't leave. I could leave. To be honest, I could sell my house and I could leave. I don't want to leave. My dad taught me to fight for my principles, and these are my principles. So I'll just read you the main points in my campaign statement, if I can. So one is the first one says, decades of work on environmental issues with various local and national organizations means I have the commitment to address environmental injustice that cuts our lifespan by years. So environment, that's number one. Decades of work on housing design, advocacy, development, including homeless shelters and affordable housing, means I have the experience to address our housing crisis. So, housing crisis is the second item. Uh, Decades of advocacy on civil and human rights here and abroad give me the tools to address reimagining public safety because clearly our system isn't working. And then, last of all, I am a founder and board member of community organizations like the River Park Coalition, People of Long Beach Reform Coalition, and it demonstrates commitment to the environment and transparency and accountability. So all of those four items are really the basic issues. Uh, you know, we talked about the environment, which is obviously number one. But in terms of housing, that's when I'm on the streets talking to people, the issue of there's two things that come up related to housing. One is the number of homeless people. The unhoused population has grown tremendously. The city has somehow managed to keep those numbers down, and I know exactly. I don't say somehow managed. I know exactly how they managed to do it. And as has happened in many cities, they come in and they do cleanups just before the homeless persons count. And they also, the city of Long Beach is one of two cities in LA County that uses its own health department to do the count. So obviously, for the city of Long Beach, it's self-serving because they can claim to have succeeded in addressing the issue of homelessness. When those of us who uh, from direct observation, can tell that that's not the case. Uh, Housing affordability has decreased tremendously, contributing to the number of homeless people. Half of the homeless people are first timers, meaning they were recently evicted. When I spoke with them a couple of months ago, when I participated in the homeless persons count, that's what they said. We couldn't afford rent anymore. And these are people who are not, crazies. They're not mentally ill. They're not drug addicts. In fact, if it wasn't for a keen eye based on years of experience, we would have overlooked counting these people. They're invisible. If you think about homelessness, uh, think of it as an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg that we see is the tiny portion. Those are the people who uh, either started out as being mentally ill or addicted to drugs from all walks of life, and they don't frankly give an expletive about being seen on the street. They don't take care of themselves, but uh, uh, the vast majority are the part of the iceberg that we don't see. um, they hold jobs, they go to school, and they lead otherwise normal lives. Eventually, some of them manage to make it out from that low, uh, and many don't. Many just give up, and then they take to drugs as a way to cope with.
Do you think
Um,
people are becoming more generally concerned about this strata of homelessness, and or are really wanting to change it?
well, I see a lot of people wanting to change it, but I see a polarization because, on the one hand, I see people who tend to be more conservative, socially conservative, and they say jail them all. Put them in a bus and take them out to the desert. Give them FEMA trailers out in the desert. Away from where we live. We don't want them to be an eyesore.
Right.
Generally, those people tend to be, on the upper strata economically. Or maybe not the upper strata, but just sort of middle class, and but generally they tend to be conservative, homeowners or even some renters. And the other are the people who are, and I hate to use this word, but woke. They have uh, uh, a small understanding of these issues that I was talking about.
Right.
What
This,
leads
this
to
kind of
homelessness.
wokeness does go back to something I learned that goes back to as far as the 1500s. And as strange as it is for us Westerners, our laws are based upon the Elizabethan poor laws, which categorize people as malingerers, which is what
Mhm.
you might think is a conservative thought, that these people are just do not want to work and that they need to be punished and reminded that they need to work. And then there are the people that see many people as being able to work and are not able to work and wanting to work, and those are the people that we should help, and that
Mhm.
somehow we are able to discern the difference between the two. And but really, I think the human condition is that we we put so much of ourself into that decision, or so much that we barely see the person before us. Meaning,
Right.
um, all the Republican or the conservative sees is that person, and all the Democrat person sees is that person. It becomes that stereotypical, but that is so much more nuanced.
Yeah.
In 2015, just for viewers to understand that 2015, 2016, and 2017, the rents in the city of Long Beach went up by 10%, making the third and second largest increase for a single city consecutive for 3 years. So
Hmm.
compounded, it went up probably 40% over those three
Hmm.
years. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
again, 2021, Long Beach reached the highest for 58% in one single year, 58%
Hmm.
rise of rent in one single year. So since 2015, just on those in this span alone of 7 years, it went up over 100%. It doubled. Um,
Hmm.
Much of people that you're talking about are living there are people that are on disability. When you talk about people on schizophrenia, I'm letting my social work mind shine. Um, People
It's
that
an
have
important one.
um, people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are obvious. They're loud, and they're sometimes just act odd. Um, but there are disabilities that you don't see it that way, and that's what a lot of people are looking into. There are people with diseases of cancer, diseases of there's well, I won't go on the list, but you can imagine the diseases that are
Oh,
not obvious, and
right.
those checks from the disability checks do not exceed $1,000. What the students receive in student loans versus the tuition that they pay there's not enough left over to pay the rent. So from students
No.
to disabled to seniors who do not receive more than $1,500 in a place that had double rent, that was $1,000 and now $2,000. They can't even afford the rent. There's this whole population, and those are those that receive about 1/3 of people who do work for a minimum wage, and so there is this pool of people that are stagnant, and the smallest hardship is putting them all homeless. Wouldn't you agree that that's a lot of? Wouldn't you agree that that's a lot of what we're seeing out in the city, in the streets today?
Yeah. Hold on 1 second, please.
Microphone, huh? I'll enjoy some tea.
Yeah.
You think
Okay. My apologies.
so? As a social worker, that is what I see. Is what I think I see. That's my ideology, as I would say. As a person living in the community, does that match a lot of what is going on today?
Yeah, it does. Precisely. I mean, I know people who I know families where, earlier I talked about unit overcrowding. I know families where that it's like one family per room, and it might be 3 or 4 people living in a room designed for 1 or 2 people, uh, 2 families living in a 2-bedroom apartment because that's the only way they can afford it. Uh, Recently, I took a look at the cost of housing in my area, and a 1-bedroom apartment rents for approximately $1,600 a month. For a single mother, for example, to be able to afford that, they would have to work 59 hours a week.
And by the way, that exceeds the minimum. That exceeds the maximum straight SSI check. So no
Yes.
senior and across the United States can afford a 1-bedroom apartment on the west side of Long Beach.
Right. Right. And there are so many stories. You mentioned illnesses. I mean, people who, the main reason for bankruptcy is major illnesses. We don't have Medicare for all. And so we end up going broke. People will lose their house, either will sell it in order to finance getting major surgery, or the bank will simply take it away. Because they can no longer afford to work and to make payments. So yeah, it's a horrible condition all around. And in the meantime, our minimum wage, the vast majority of private employers in Long Beach are less than 25 people, meaning that we're still getting paid $14 per hour. If you walk across our border to the city of LA, they're getting paid $16 an hour. I not that minimum wage means a lot to me. I support living wage.
Yes.
Which is far more realistic, meaning that here in Long Beach, a single person without any dependents should be making $19 per hour minimum. Even that is still, insufficient. We have people like teachers who can't afford to rent an apartment, if they're single. Why can't a teacher live in the city that they teach? If they have kids, their kids can't attend the schools, where their parents are teachers. We have the workers, the support workers for the schools, and they make minimum wage. The bus drivers, the cooks, the clerical staff. I mean, a lot of them, make minimum wage.
Teachers' aides. I'm glad that you see the world, or we see the world in so similar ways. You have whoever is running with any sense has their work cut out living in Long Beach. But I wanted to do a video with you. I'm doing interviews with statewide candidates, but you are at the heart. I just want to say finally, I believe that you are at the very tip of the spear, the center of what is really wrong environmentally with burning oil and having people live right next to it. And when people talk about numbers and money, jobs are more important, whatever it is, you are right there, enduring the illnesses and watching your community get sick. And you know that this is not numbers, this is a real condition of life.
Yeah, exactly. It isn't I frequently tell people, particularly people who don't really know, and all they want to know is numbers. I tell them it's not a statistic. I'm not a statistic. I am I'm the walking poster boy for everything that's wrong environmentally in our community. Uh, I have cancer. I have neurological disorders. I have asthma. I have endocrinology disorders. And it's not just me. I mean, my neighbors. Um, Fortunately, my kids and my wife are doing okay. But you know, uh, it. I've seen so many people, suffer from diseases that they shouldn't. You know, there's no reason why we should be suffering for the sake of cheap stuff you get at Walmart. And that's essentially what it is. Because, my opponent in this race and the mayor who is now running for Congress, their issue with this supply side fiasco is, well, people aren't going to get their Christmas gifts. Well, what that means is the shippers are not going to be able to reap profits. Mm-hmm. And those profits are extracted from years of our lives.
It is a sad world. It is that there's no more real nuance anymore when it comes to this kind of thing about the environment, about how resources are being destroyed, about the way we consume plastics, are committed to oil. And we are now we are at the precipice of seeing so much that's bad, but so many people are afraid of, I think, are looking to be embarrassed and wrong, that they might think that there might be a chance that what we're about to see is not going to be horrible because we have yet to see the worst of it yet. But scientists and you and I know that it's all, first of all, what's already happening is a tragedy and should be illegal. But what is about to come is what we really want to say. We're not afraid to see the future and beg people that we have to change the way we vote, change the way we consume, and change the way we live.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I do indeed endorse you to 1,000% and wish you a good, tons of vote. And I really do wish you could win.
Thank you very much, Henk. I really appreciate it, and I have to say that you've also been an inspiration. Your race against the mayor was incredible, and I'm so sorry about that. Your the deaths in your family that affected how you ran, but that's we all have to get in that fight. We can't just talk about it. And for me, your race was an inspiration. So here I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.